Oh.
Hi, Scott.
Thanks.
Adam, Marie, can you guys hear us okay? Someone do a sound check back for us.
I can hear you.
Yep.
Me too.
Oh, hold on. We're not getting, we can't hear you. Hold on just a second. I just keep turning the TV up, make sure the volume's up on TV. Gotta be an easier one.
I see.
Come out of the owl, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. I know. Good, how are you? Mr. Green, she wasn't.
All right.
Yeah, that's great. No, I just didn't.
Scott, will you do a sound check for us real quick?
Sure, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Me too.
Thanks, Marie. Adam, can you hear us okay?
Yes, sounds great.
All right, well, 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call the regular November meeting of the USD 417 Board of Education to order. Thanks everyone for being here and online. We'll go ahead and we will do introduction. We'll start in the room and then we'll hit the people online. So I'm Terry Powell.
Tina Ray Scott, Peter Knight, Mary Myers, Ellery Gear, Kelsey Bremer, Dana Reddick, Carissa Dahlquist,
Taylor Green.
Jamie Johnson,
Kelly McDiffit.
Heather Hunnis, Kelsey Hartman,
Marcus Hernandez.
Miles Gant.
Aaron Doty. Sorry.
Bryce Johnson.
Scott, we'll move to you.
Very polite.
Adam Dirks.
All right, so we're all accounted for. Thank you, everyone. We'll start here with the consent agenda. And tonight that includes the approval of the agenda, approval of the minutes of previous meetings, financial report, paid bills, donations and gifts. Personnel, we have 3 employments: Samantha Acevedo, Counts Grove Elementary School preschool aide; Dustin San Romani, Counts Grove Junior High head wrestling coach; Justin Skurs, Counts Grove Junior High assistant wrestling coach. 2 resignations, one from Kim Sample as a Counts Grove Elementary preschool aide, and one from Lisa Steele, Counts Grove Junior Senior High School custodian. Anything on there anyone would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion on that item? All in favor, raise your right hand. Patron forum, you said we have none, Bryce, at this point. Anybody here in person that wants? All right, spotlight on education. I believe we've got a couple of FFA or
We lost your audio. Aaron, we lost your audio.
There you go. There you go. Is that better?
Yep.
Oh, this is-
I wonder if Heather accidentally hit it with her hair.
Probably.
I think that's it.
If a fly can.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, sorry, Chris.
All right, let's start over.
Okay, my name's Carissa Dahlquist. I'm our FFA chapter president here. And I appreciate the opportunity to come tell you guys a little bit about what we've been doing. So for a little background, the National FFA organization has over 750,000 members and state associations in all 50 states, plus Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. And there are over 9,000 chapters across the country. And for 1 week a year, they all gather together in Indianapolis, Indiana to compete, to explore, and to connect with each other. So first, let's dive into the competition side of the convention. There are 19 nationally recognized career development events and 7 recognized leadership development events, covering everything from floriculture to meats evaluation and ag mechanics to extemporaneous public speaking. There are countless opportunities for success for those willing to work for it. I represented Kansas in the prepared public speaking event with a speech comparing alternative proteins to real wheat. This year, due to pandemic protocols, the preliminary round was held in Zoom in September. And although I didn't make it to the in-person semifinal round, I was recognized as a bronze medalist at the awards presentation. Our chapter was also able to watch the top 4 speakers in final saw, and we learned about everything from cloning to plastic use in agriculture, and learned a lot from the presentation skills of the top 4 speakers in the nation. We also attended live sessions and watched recordings of the ones that we missed. We heard retiring addresses from the national officers and listened to the keynote speaker, Courtney Dehoff. She spoke about her experiences as an agriculture kid trying to make it on TV. She shared how she forged her own path, reporting on agriculture stories that deserve attention, and has started the Fancy Lady Cowgirl movement. Plus, she grew up in Tonganoxie and is Miss Hauk's niece. So it was really cool to see somebody so close to home up on the big stage in front of all the kids. Our other activities included a Hoosier Park horse racing, an escape room, and a hypnotist show. You can ask him about that later. In between events, we spent our time at the expo and shopping mall. There were more than 250 exhibitors there, covering everything from colleges to welding simulators. There was something for everyone to explore. All in all, the trip to National Convention is always a jam-packed week filled with the best that FFA had to offer. We were inspired by everything that the members and chapters across the country have accomplished and are more excited than ever about the future of agriculture. We appreciate your support because it is critically important to keep agricultural education in schools, especially in an agricultural community such as this one. Agriculture is one of our society's most important endeavors, especially when ensuring this year's convention theme, for the future, for all. Thank you. I don't know if Lacey have anything else to add?
So what was your favorite part of the convention? Well, if you had to come back and go speak to the rest of the school and recruit them, what would you tell them to get them involved so they could become experienced like you did?
Well, I love the expo and I talked with a bunch of different colleges, but just the feeling of being there with 50,000 I don't know how many it was this year. On a normal year, it's like 50,000 people. Being all there dressed in the same official dress for the same purpose is such a cool feeling.
Well, thank you for representing
Yes.
Morris County.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. So the speech on the real beef versus the not real,
Uh-huh.
is there an opportunity for the rest of the world to hear that at some point?
Yeah.
Well, we
Give that some
15
thought.
We got 15 minutes.
I think that's an interesting topic, and I think there would be people in our community that would be interested in hearing what those differences are. So maybe if an opportunity were to present itself, there would be a fan base for some of that kind of stuff. So
Yes.
give that some thought. But
Thank you.
and I would second Mr. Doty. Thank you for coming tonight and presenting to us.
Yes.
As Mr. Powell said that, I mean, we have all kinds of technology. So maybe there's a way, even just a small portion of your thinking to get out there via the technology that we have. So it's an idea.
Yeah. Very good.
Thank you, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good kids.
Appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to reports.
You guys can leave. I'm sure my child especially wants to hear that because those ladies have to get to 4-H.
Yeah.
So
bet my wife would
Thanks.
like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right, well, we'll just kind of start around. Ms. Garrett, you have anything to add or update on your reports?
I was like, wait, what? No, I don't have anything to add.
All right, Mrs. Bremer. Dana, I'll hit you as I go by.
Most of my update stuff is on the website, so if there's any questions, just let me know.
Okay.
We're just still rolling.
Okay, very good. Mr. McGiffet. Thomas? Cody?
Yeah.
Oh, hold on, let's try everything. All right. Then we'll go.
Real quick, just some enrollment update numbers. Want to go over them because it'll lead us into another discussion that we need to start having and looking at projecting to the future. So let me share my screen so those online can see as well, the members at home. So here's some enrollment projections, or not projections, but trend lines for historical data going back the last 3 years. And so real quick, so you'll know what you're looking at. The numbers represent under each column. The first number is our September 20th count date, which is what we use for funding purposes for state revenue. The second number is the end of year count. So I like to look at those to see what's the difference between September 20th, what we got paid for, versus where we ended the year. So I know how we're going to roll into the next year for projection's sake. So that's how each column is divided up. So you go back to 2019, the middle column is 2020, and the third column is 2021. So as you can see what the numbers are, what they were, and how they've been, how we reacted to the pandemic, how we bounced back from the pandemic, some of the enrollment. We're hoping we see that trend line continue to go back up as we're on the backside of the pandemic now and get back to some normalcy. One concern though that does rise out of this, as you'll notice, there is one anomaly at Prairie Heights Elementary School. Their first grade class is a very large class. They have 23 students in there now. They just received another enrollment last week. And bumped them up. So in discussions with Ms. Gear and Ms. Anderson and Mrs. Gentry, we need to get some relief into that class and some support in that class in some capacity. And so this year, we'll be able, I think, to do that through some substitute type support for some staff that we may be able to use on a substitute pay scale basis to go in and provide some support, because they wouldn't be doing full teaching. They would be more doing support, co-teaching, and more like an interventionist, but yet a step up from that. Whereas Ms. Anderson would still be doing all the planning and grading and so forth, that this person can help alleviate some of the group size. But then that talk leads to discussion about sustainability, because that's not something we would do every year after that. So probably what that's going to start looking at first and foremost is, do we combo a class? Do we need to look at what the kindergarten size is next year there? We're projected to be probably around 4 to 5 students as of right now. Of course, we all know how that goes. That could go up based on people moving in, or just kids we don't know of right now in our pre-K system, or it could go down if someone moved out. So we don't know how that is, but that's kind of our projections right now. So if that holds true, we'll probably looking at comboing kindergarten and first grade next year to free up an FTE, then to split that larger class with the current staff we have. We have some backup plans to that, obviously, that depends on, there's a lot of variables that go into that, obviously. So that's kind of starting a discussion now and bringing it to your attention that that's probably something that's going to come to fruition down the road. And we can start planning for that now and having conversations with staff in that building as to what that looks like and helping them prepare, especially whoever would be doing the comboing, to get resources in place for them to be comfortable doing that, because that is a different beast in comboing a classroom with a multi-grade level like that. We've done it. I've done it in the past in previous districts. I don't know if you've done it here in the past with being head shake. So it's definitely doable, but it's not the norm. It's outside of that norm, and we need to start preparing for that now if that's the direction we go. You can see the rest of the numbers down through the elementary school here in Council Grove, and then the junior high school. So overall, we're still holding pretty strong in enrollment otherwise. Scroll down, there you go. You can see we're still at, as of today, we're at 777 students if you count on pre-K. I divide that out separately because it's important to understand, as we've gone over in budget many times, our general fund is based on K through 12, our at-risk dollars, then paid for our pre-K program, which is a 0.5 FTE. So that's why I separate those out, because I don't want to give a false sense of budgetary inflation saying we're at 777 students, but we're really only getting paid for 729 on September 20th. And then we use at-risk dollars through pre-K money to fund part-time, partially fund our pre-K program. We still supplement that out of our general fund, but a large portion is covered through pre-K at-risk dollars. Hopefully that's something we see change in the future of the state, as there is an emphasis on early childhood. Hopefully maybe more emphasis will be placed on funding pre-K programs at a normal FTE instead of through at-risk dollars. But we'll see as we progress through the legislative cycle on that. Any questions on enrollment numbers? Any questions on the first grade situation at Prairie Heights?
Yeah, I have a question, and it's just to fill in the gap for me. What is a traditional class size when we know it's too many? So like,
It's a great question. That's
what's
a
the
hard,
tipping point, I guess,
Right.
of needing the assistant?
so that's a hard conversation to have in generalities, because with nowadays with social emotional behavior expectations, IEPs, that may look different from grade level to grade level. So we've had conversations about, for instance, at third grade in Council Grove, I believe it's third grade, you have 4 sections, correct, with 61 students. Well, that's probably a pretty low ratio. But then when you take into account some of the needs that might be prevalent in that class, that might warrant a lower ratio. So in a perfect world, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably around that 18 to 20 range in a lower elementary classroom like that is probably an ideal range. You probably could support more based on classroom supports if we had a full-time para in there, or an aide versus, or a teacher who might have more strengths in lower early childhood that could maybe facilitate those transitions better. But 18 to 20, is that a normal? I don't know what your history's been in the past here, but for me personally, that's kind of the target we try to keep in early childhood in those lower primary ed classes, to keep it more manageable, especially with expectations nowadays with more individualized learning and center-based learning, and with our MTSS structure to really get down and dive into prescriptive measures of where kids are at, where their deficits are. I mean, the more numbers, the more people that takes. And so trying to keep those ratios a little lower, so our MTSS program is a little more successful as well in those areas. So, but then you look at, you go through the sections, you know, some of these other sections that are larger, the Council Grove Elementary School, we have 2 sections as well. So it just kind of, it really depends on, it's more of an individualized conversation on the makeup of that particular class instead of an overall generality.
And is there, well, I don't want this to happen where we would lose students there. So let's say next fall, there's 20 students in that class as it moves.
That changes the conversation.
Okay, that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Would that be a different conversation than? Okay.
Or, and, you know, maybe it drops down to 20, but then we have a different need move in, and that could change the conversation depending on whether it's an IEP need or a 504 need or whatnot too. So yeah, just a lot of variables that come into play. I know our identifiable IEP minutes are way up. And that's part of the challenge in Kansas right now that you're not hearing a lot of narrative about the public, is that as enrollments trends tend to be decreasing, our high needs population requiring more dollars and more personnel are increasing. And so there's this inverse narrative going on of, well, if population is decreasing, if enrollment's declining, we should be able to fund less because we have less needs. But in the actuality, the real narrative is our needs are going up, even though enrollment trends are going down in Kansas, especially rural Kansas. But yet we're at all-time high with number of identified students on IEPs. We're at all-time high in the number of minutes requirements in IEPs. So it's a real balancing act, especially as budgets get cut. But we got to plant more budget money into our co-op through our special ed program. I think the higher up you go in elementary, the easier it is to have a larger class sizes, maybe to the lower to mid-20s, just because of they're more mature, so to speak. There's more self-regulation that goes on. It's less transitions, easier to manage transitions probably than in a K-1-2 setting, where transitions are more intense, and in an older upper elementary setting as well. It humbled me real quick to walk into our pre-K classrooms and our kindergarten classrooms.
They're doing a lot more than when
Oh
our
my
kids
goodness.
went.
Oh my goodness. You know, they say it takes a village, and that is so true. That's all I got.
All right. Board members?
And I'm apologizing because I had a piece of gum in my mouth that I just swallowed, so. Yeah, that was great. We attended the Kansas Association of School Boards annual convention. Sorry, over the weekend, Mr. Doty, Deidre, and myself, and phenomenal opportunity and experience for all of us. We had some phenomenal breakout speakers. David Hawthorne kicked everything off for us. We had Dr. Lindy Watson Saturday morning, and then yesterday morning, Principal L spoke to the group. Breakout sessions that were so great that we had to try to decide who was going where because of the information that was presented. And just really great 4 days of opportunity to engage and be together with other people who are passionate about kids around the state.
Outstanding. Anything to add? All right. Anybody else? Moving on to discussion items. The ESSER 3 staff premium pay.
So the reason this is on here, we need to start talking about, we're finished up with our ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 applications and allotments. Now we're moving on to ESSER 3. With each allotment of funds, they're from different administrations, and so the rules have changed, right? So with ESSER 1, it was pretty generic. ESSER 2 became more defined and restrictive, and now ESSER 3 is very much defined and restrictive on what we can use it for, and a lot more rules tied to how we can use it and when we can use it. So the ARP money, which is tied to ESSER 3, we need to, if we're going to use premium pay, which is the new definition for either paying for COVID-related work or retention pay, which is much easier to use it for retention than it is to track COVID-related hours for, because it's still tied to title federal dollars, which means you still have to trace where the count for the work being done. So we don't, last thing we want to do is make people take work logs of when they're doing what and more work for them to do throughout the day. So it's easier to use it from a retention base, because then we can do it from a district level based on our line item categories underneath our budget software. Because we track that already, how we pay title services or how we pay at-risk services, or if we pay general licensed staff or classified staff, depending on where they're assigned to throughout the district. That's already tracked in our accounting software. So we can use that for our workload code for these federal dollars when we get our audit there. So it'd be easier to use it from a retention standpoint. And if we're going to do that, you can't pay with ESSER 3 for past work or past practices. You can only pay for future. So we have to notify staff that we're going to do something like that before we can do it. So if we wanted to use some of our ESSER funds to do a premium pay situation this semester or this year, and then for those that come back next year, a retention pay out of that as well, we have to notify them before we do that. So last year, we gave some of our ESSER $2 for basically a Christmas bonus, so to speak, but it was for COVID-related work that they've done. Rules have changed now. We can't do that unless we notify them ahead of time that, hey, if you come back to school on January 1st, you're eligible for a retention bonus, or if you're here on this day, you're eligible for a retention bonus. We don't have to define the amount in the notification. We just have to notify them that's going to happen. But I kind of want to get a pulse. That's different than it was before. We just found that out a couple at the state meeting that you had to notify previous. You can't go back and retro pay. Is how they look at it under ESSER $3 like we could with ESSER 2. So I just want to get a pulse from the board to see if that is acceptable to do, so I can work and getting some notifications out and tracking what the wording of that. So we're underneath the legal guidelines, so we don't get in an audit situation and they reject that. What's everybody's thought on using our ESSER $3 for some retention pay under the premium pay category staff?
Good with that.
I think that's
Yeah.
where it belongs.
So we have to spend 20% on learning loss by law defined with there's a caveat, it has to be evidence-based. So it's not something just think works or we know works. It's got to be an evidence-based practice. So if you can't tie it, there hasn't been a research study on it done somewhere that shows evidence-based results, you can't use it. So a lot of the software we use that we were planning on using for that 20% gap we can't use, because it's not tied until we can find, and some of the service centers are working with us on doing that. Together basically lists, and there's a national database of lists that are linking educational software and practices and programs to evidence-based out there as they find them and pair them. But so we're gonna work on that. So 20% of that ESSER 3 funds has to go to that. So we'll use like our summer learning program that we did at the high school for credit recovery to get kids caught up and make sure seniors can graduate on time. We'll use that, any of the staffing for that, and any of the expenses that went along with that. We'll try to tie in all of the new programming and software that we bought to work with our interventionist groups for the new dyslexia training and the new dyslexia science of reading training, which also applies to the learning loss that we can tie into those interventions. So we'll try to do a lot of those for that 20% mandatory second portion of the ESSER 3 funds.
All right. Anybody have any objections to that idea?
I just have a question. Can any of that money be used for food costs?
Can you clarify, because all lunch meals are free now? So when you say food costs, what do you mean by that? Can you explain
I would-
that?
Yeah, I would imagine that food costs are probably increasing some, just like everywhere else, and I didn't know if that could be used to cover any of it.
Oh, you hear the supply chain disruption? Yeah. No, if you can relate it to the state's reply to anything like questions like that too is how do you tie it to COVID? And so even though the supply chain disruption we tied to COVID, but for us on site, using it to pay for food would probably not be an option. Plus, since it's free, we get a higher reimbursement from the federal level now, since all meals are free than we do when we normally charge our local rate. So we are taking that extra money that the extra income that we get now because all meals being free for this year. And Becky has done a great job of, we worked together to let's increase our menu options to more expensive menu options. Let's increase our portion sizes some. So she's investing those dollars back into the meals for the kids. And so it's not like we're just banking a lot of money and saving it. We're reinvesting it back into the meals for the kids. So hopefully there's talk about where they extend that program on for the years to come. But here's the challenge legislatively. I think we'll need to make sure that the narrative is very clear on when it comes out, when the session starts, is that I think they're going to push that meals stay free for kids because they see the benefit, but they're not going to pay for it. So it'll be another unfunded mandate that we then have to figure out how to pay for locally. So you'll see some lobbyists probably testify against that, but it's not because they're against having kids have free access to nutrition in school. They're against an unfunded mandate that says, hey, yeah, every kid's meals have to be free, but guess what? We're not paying for it. You figure it out locally. So, because in the essence, then you're still paying for it because we got to pass that on somehow through either a tax increase in those districts who are already leveled out, like we are, maxed out on meals. There's no tax increase to have. So something's got to be cut to do that then. So if you see that come up in legislative sessions this year and someone's speaking out against it and they're education friendly, that's why.
All right. Any other questions around the ESSER $3 and the premium pay? All right, we'll move on then to an action item, which is the 8th grade field trip. And it looks like they're requesting approval to go out of state.
And I might add, that date is, it appears to me that's a date that was one we had approved before. That is not the date in question. We'll be going probably in March, but that is not the correct date that's listed there.
So what you could do is, this is their annual trip to
Yes.
Steamboat
This is
Arabia and all
just
that.
to
So
resume what we haven't done.
so you could just approve the trip
But
without. date.
Not include the date. I just want to make certain we understand that date's a Friday of spring break. As I sat here tonight,
Yeah,
double
I just
checking
pulled
that.
it from the calendar.
It was the last one we approved was on March 18th in a year that we just created, or we just went into the pandemic, actually. So
Well, and that's the spring break schedule has shifted.
It has
from the
changed.
Second
Has
week
changed,
in
so.
March, the last
don't.
week in March. and everywhere
I would like
between.
just make sure you pull out the date. That's something we just need to have approval that we can go ahead and proceed with making a plan to schedule that, which is a similar one we've been doing in the past.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
We do need a
Okay, Mr. President, I propose that we let the 8th grade field trip happen on whatever date they would like to happen.
Second.
I've been moved and seconded that we approve the 8th grade trip to Kansas City, Missouri. Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? So passed.
Thank you.
One thing real quick.
Yep.
We probably need to put this on the agenda to do moving forward, just need to do it. Do we want to have Bright or Miles give us maybe just any update from a high school perspective on the student engagement perspective? I'm putting you on the spot, so you don't have a chance to prepare for this, so you don't have to now, but.
May I put him on the spot?
Sure.
Because this young man performed not once, not twice, but 3 times over this past weekend and was a wonderful representative. He sits here as a student liaison, but he was leading our musical over the weekend. Really marvelous job. He's a very talented young man.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you very much. I would say that students, it's finals week and we're all gonna start cramming. But I feel like we've all gotten used to these things and yeah, it sucks, but we're still in school. No one's gotten COVID at school. And I think it's really nice to see that everyone's coming together and realizing that. I will add that the bathroom situation, personally, I thought it was disgusting. In that way that.
Probably better get some context to that. So people that don't know what's going on with TikTok. Might want to try to give a little
So
preview.
what the situation was, this was way back, I'm high school, I know way back in, when school started, there was this trend on TikTok that you would steal something from your bathroom, deface your bathroom at your school. Thankfully, it didn't catch on until last month, the day of last month it was, and Mr. Dornbos did a wonderful job. He solved the problem, closed all the bathrooms but one. I thought that was amazing the way he did it and just jumped into action. But we've all gotten better. I haven't seen any defacing, property destruction since the bathrooms have opened up again. And I think we should keep the form that Mr. Dornbos has created online for everyone to fill out if they're going to leave the room at any point in time.
Well, one of the nice things about having young leaders like this president and others like him in the school is that it's nice to create a sense of culture where they hold each other accountable. So we don't have to, so they take pride in each other and having someone else go to someone and say, hey, knock it off. This is our house, this is our place. And you're part of that. It's the word "our." And so holding each other accountable, not peer pressure in a good way. So that's nice to see. So thank you for being a leader in that standpoint, encouraging others to do the same. We need more of that.
You also named that we have a leader that's doing a good job of handling things. So that's good to hear on that part as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Miles.
Well, I'd also like to commend Miles. Last time he was here, we asked him what he was doing with his future. You want to share what's happened since then?
All right.
How many times can I put you on the spot tonight?
So, when I went to the Apply Kansas event at Flint Hills Tech University, I applied for Emporia State and K-State Polytechnic in Salina. I got accepted into K-State Polytechnic Salina about 2 weeks after that. It wasn't even 2 weeks. And it's a wonderful campus. I've been up there once. I'm going up there again. And they're on an old Air Force base. It's a regional airport that they're right next to. Actually just learned today that they are an emergency landing site for NASA. And they have a lot of good options for kids that don't want to be in Manhattan, but want to still go into engineering and aerospace. It's really cool, and I'm very excited to go up there.
Yeah.
Neat piece of that story is the event that you went to that kind of springboard all that Mrs. Day, did Mrs. Day, Mrs. MacGyver
That,
Thank you.
well, I first went to Polytech right before COVID, that February before COVID, with an FBLA trip. But yes, I would not have probably applied until now if it wasn't for that Apply Kansas event. This day has been a good help getting my classes and seeing what credits need to be. And she said last year, Miles, if you're gonna do this, you gotta take trick. I don't want to trick. I love doing that. It's so much fun. I'm so good at it.
But the important things about stories behind this is recognizing not only our awesome students we have, but the staff that are behind the scenes pushing every day to make it possible for these kids. They get overlooked, right? Miss Day, Miss McGyver, and all of them that have a piece of that. So, but kudos to them because they're pushing behind the scenes. They don't get recognition for that. There's no one because that's just their job and they do it and they love to do it. And they want to see kids be successful like this. So if you get a chance to say thank you to them, definitely do because they need it.
So Mr. McDivitt, on that note, Ms. Gronquist just last week took a group of kids from the district, her culinary kids, to the cut down at Flint Hills Tech. And they got to participate in the kitchen and actually be engaged and involved down there in that process. And then Ms. Day also is taking more students to the VOTEC next week. So Kate, you want to talk about your experience?
So like you said, we took students to the cut at Flint Hills Tech. So I went ahead and talked to current culinary students, other students that I knew were interested in pursuing culinary careers. And so all of the students that I took with me are at least, exploring entering the culinary profession as, something that they're looking at down the road. And so this wasn't just a, field trip. This is them getting to experience that and see one of our nearby programs. So we originally were just planning on attending the cut, which is a competition similar to the TV show Chopped between their Flint Hills Tech students. However, this year was actually their All-Stars competition where they brought back the past 4 winners, which did include the Council Grove alumni and our current food service staff, Addis and Bakura. And so it was kind of neat to have those hometown ties there. So we were able to register, I believe, 12 students to attend, and Becky Shear took a second van so that we could, bring all of those students. Because that was outside of my driving capacity, which is where I originally kept it, but we had such a higher interest in that. And so I was glad to be able to bring on a second person there. But so we were able to register, and then the Flint Hills Tech College actually reached out, which Brian Couch, I've worked with him before on some of our culinary related tour things. But he was able to set up a really cool opportunity for, it was basically just us and 2 students from Solomon. So it was mostly a private tour. But we went there, we were able to talk to their chef that's in charge of their program, and she threw them directly into the kitchen preparing appetizers for the event. It was not just like for fun. It was food that was served, and the kids had a blast doing that. And after that, they were able to take a tour of campus and see all of the different programs. But it was really neat. The kids seemed to really enjoy it. They just updated their kitchen there within the past year, and so that was a really cool experience. I haven't even been there since that. And so the kids seemed excited to be there, excited to cook, and they have a lot of fun watching that competition. Unfortunately, our 2 Council Grove people did get out. They were not our winner, but that's okay. They still had a bunch of fun. And towards the end of the night, we had all the questions like, are we doing this again next year? Do you want to? Like, sure, we can. So yeah, it was a really, really great opportunity. And honestly, I really appreciate the staff at Flint Hills Tech for setting up some of those unique opportunities for our students to experience campus. And I think it definitely sparked some interest. We had a freshman through seniors there. And so they were kind of catering to all across the board, but they did a really great job.
I will add that, like, experiences like that, it's not necessarily the experiences themselves, but the people that are behind you and that make those things happen, those apply Kansas, going to cook. It's the people behind that really drive students nowadays, because high school kids won't get good grades for themselves. I know that, and if I don't want to see someone else seeing me fail, right? So I think that the more we do that, the more we show that, you know, all teachers care, but more teacher to student. I'm lucky enough to have a whole lot of teacher connections. I can call each and every single one of them my friend. But I think some students just don't feel that. And I see that, you know, a teacher's trying, but a student won't give into it. I've seen it happen with some of your students, like Darren, wonderful cook. And I think that's due to you actually being behind him and pushing him to his capabilities.
Thank you, Miles.
But I think we gotta validate kids, you know, I've had conversations with kids before and say, how old are you? And they'll say, well, I'm 15. It's well, you need to be 15. But guess what? I've been 15 too. Then I've been 16. And then I've been 17. So we know what's coming as educators and adults. So it's not like we're trying to tell you what to do, because we care and we want to see you be successful. So that's our job, to help you navigate being 15. But then also looking out to be what happens when you become 16 and then 17. So that's a great narrative there, Miles. I do have one more thing.
Okay.
We're about done, and I know we've got a lot of great things here, but I don't want to end on a negative note, but I want to just give a little PSA out there. As we draw closer to the legislative session starting up, I really want to give a ploy to everyone, not only here in this room, but those who may be watching online, to really get involved this year in the legislative process. There's going to be a special committee convened at the end of this month, and the purpose of that is to cut funding to education. They're going to be looking at ACT scores and other scores and trying to tie that to with the increase in funding that we've received due to the Gannon lawsuit has not been effective, and therefore they should cut the funding to education. So what the narrative needs to be, in my opinion, is we don't hear on the news that our graduation rates in Kansas have risen every year. We don't hear on the news that our post-secondary effective rate, which are those things we've been talking about tonight, have been on the increase for the last several years on an upward trend. Our subgroups within our graduation rates and our graduation rates as a whole are on an uptrend and uptick in Kansas as a whole. So it is effective, and we are being effective. But what we don't talk about at the legislature is the need and the trickle effect it has by the people in the positions that make that data change. And we are short of people in Kansas, big time. We're in a national crisis. We're in a state crisis for teacher shortage, for classified staff shortage. They're just as important as our teachers. And it takes everyone that comes together as a team. If we don't have food service workers and our kids can't get fed properly, they're not going to learn in the classroom properly if they're hungry. If we don't have interventionists to come into the classroom and support our students as aides and paras, then we're not going to have successful intervention groups, because the teachers can't do it all and the paras and aides can't do it all. And so we're short here in Morris County. We have a teacher shortage. We're lucky, we're blessed, because we're right between two universities, that we don't have open positions. But we do have people in those positions that aren't initially where they were certified to be in. And luckily they have a passion for kids. And so they worked hard to get certified, and we work with them to do that. But we're still short in classified staff in a lot of positions. We're still short in paras and aides in a lot of positions. And so I think the narrative we really need to talk to legislatures about, and they don't listen to educators, because they'll straight tell you that you're supposed to say that. They listen to parents and business owners and community members. And they need to keep funding education, and we need to put those dollars towards people. We need to pay a fair and proper wage for a professional. We need to pay, McDonald's is paying $15 to $20 an hour right now, sometimes more depending on the area here in Kansas. And we're paying $11 an hour. We can't compete with that. Most businesses can't compete. So we need to put those dollars and continue to fund education and use those dollars in the commitment towards people. And then we'll see a more direct impact on those scores down the road. Our ACT scores will go up. Our graduation rates will continue to go up. Our post-secondary effectiveness will continue to go up, because we have people in the positions behind the scenes pushing kids to do the best they can be. So really get involved and encourage people in your circle to get involved. This is going to be a very critical year in the legislature for education. So we need all the advocates we can get to talk about the importance. And I think this is the year, because I don't think anybody undervalues what school does now after a pandemic and having that kids stay at home. I think a lot of people now understand and realize the importance that people play in the role of education, and educators and classified staff have in doing that. So now is the time to start changing that narrative. It's about people. It's not about ACT scores. those are results of having the right people in the right places. So we need to really get involved this year. It's going to be a tough year legislatively.
Anything else? All right, then with that, we will be adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again next month.
I know. That's a new one for me.
Okay. No, I didn't see that.
Did you see one? But I didn't